This is white versus the Pirc, lesson 1. e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, f4, bishop g7, knight f3, c5, bishop b5 check, bishop d7. Black has 5 other legal continuations. Only the knight blocks are worth brief consideration. Knight b d7, which would follow by e5, knight g4, e6, f takes e6, knight g5. And this wins for white. Another variation, if we come back to here, would be knight f d7, which would follow with d takes c5, d takes c5, white castles, black castles, and e5. And that's obviously more pleasant for white. And we can also consider knight c6. It's attracted a slightly larger following. White should again play d5, or d takes c5, queen a5, castles, castles. And now either take the pawn with c takes d6, or play queen e1, knight d7, bishop takes c6, queen takes c5 check, bishop e3, queen takes e6, and knight d5, which is excellent for white. So now, if we back up initially to this move, now you might say here that d5, what about d5? So d5, a6, bishop e2, knight a7 is just about okay for black. So back to our original. We've got here white played bishop b5 check, bishop d7, e5. The main idea behind the check is to stop black from meeting e4 to e5 with knight f d7. e5, knight f d7 is fine for black and is covered later in this chapter, and force him to find a more precarious home for the knight. Now, a few players would prefer here bishop takes d7, for example, knight b takes d7, e5, knight h5, and now white can win a piece. g4, knight f4, knight takes f4, bishop takes f4, c takes d4, knight e4. But black has 3 pawns in a big center after d takes e5, and should be okay. Now, you may have noticed that in this position, knight could just, or how do we have it here? In this position actually, that white could just play here e takes d6, whereas black can just castle and kind of dies out there. So we back up to e5, and we have black's 7th move, knight g4, bishop d7 check. Now, the main line is e6, and we'll cover that in a later lecture. Another possibility is h3, and that'll be also covered. So let's see. Bishop takes d7. Queen takes d7. Black could recapture knight takes d7, e6, knight takes f6, knight g5. But that leaves black in serious trouble. Queen takes d7, d5. Now, what about a move like h3? Now, this is rarely played, but the position after c takes d4, queen takes d4, knight h6, g4 is not without danger for black. He should probably prefer knight c6 as opposed to risking the position after d takes e5, queen takes d7 check, knight takes d7, f takes e5, where white's pieces are, or soon will be very active. So we have here d5, d takes e5, h3, e4. Now that's obviously preferable to knight h6, f takes e5, e4, knight takes e4. Writers have been saying for years that h takes g4 deserves more attention, but I don't have anything more to say on it than that. E takes f3, queen takes f3, knight a6, bishop d2, knight b4, queenside castle, and this leads to an interesting game. So here we have knight takes e4, knight f6, knight takes f6. It could have been knight e5. After knight e5, both queen to a4. Let's see how that would go. Knight c3, queen a6, and let's say that the move was queen d8. So then that knight takes f6 check, e takes f6, knight c. Oh, and that's that. So both of those seem fine for black. Knight takes f6 check, bishop takes f6, kingside castle, and the game is about level, although black still needs to play quite accurately to maintain the balance.